So I wanted to make this little video explaining what mastering is in a simple way, because a lot of people seem to be quite confused between mixing and mastering and not quite sure what it is. So I thought I would make that clear, and to do that I think I need to explain a few different terms: mixing, mastering, tracks, stems being the main ones that are kind of confusing and muddying the waters a little bit. So here we go. Right, so mastering is the last thing that you do after you've mixed the tracks. It's a separate process. Usually one person mixes the tracks and a complete other person masters the music. When we're making a piece of music for release, we have three main elements. We have the recording, we have the mixing, and we have the mastering. So the mastering is its own separate process that happens after the mixing has happened. So recording, we probably all know what that is. You get a load of mics, you stick around stuff, put some on the drums, put one on the singer, give some to the bass player if they're lucky, and then record each microphone separately. So each one of those microphones, the different sources, gets recorded as a track. And we can mix these tracks into a mix. So when it's a mix, you can no longer separate the different elements out of that song. You're stuck with it as it is. It's a bit like when you mix a cake or something like that. You can combine all the elements together to make the dough, but then you can't extract the flour out of that dough again. So this mix that we end up with has two tracks, left and right. It's also known as a 2-track or as a pre-master. And then we will send that track off to be mastered. So with mastering, we only get this 2-track of music. We don't get all the separate elements laid out. So you can't really, make the drums a lot louder or, turn the bass guitar down a lot. Although you can do things to the track that would kind of help with that, you really are limited in what you can do. So really you're standing back and looking at the whole finished song, or almost finished song, and just saying, what can I do? What little tweaks can I do to just enhance it? The number one thing that a mastering engineer has at their disposal is fresh ears. So obviously musicians and producers and mixers, they've been listening to that song and that mix for a long period of time, and they've got used to how it sounds. So a mastering engineer will be able to come to it completely fresh and notice things right away that might not be noticed by the people more heavily involved in the track. So a mastering engineer, broadly speaking, is looking at the same kind of things that you do with a mix. The overall tonal balance, lows and highs, the volume / dynamics, the difference between your loudest and quietest sound, how punchy is it, and all of that. And, your sense of width and depth, spatialization, saturation, and all this kind of stuff. And they'll use a lot of the same tools to get there that you would in a mix. EQ, compression, limiting, like maybe saturation, and obviously running it through specific bits of outboard gear to get a certain coloration or a certain effect into the sound. So what people generally would notice the most about mastering is the overall volume increase. And by that we mean essentially a decrease of dynamic between the loudest part of the sound and the quietest part of the sound, because the loudest part of the sound is turned down using limiting, compression, saturation, that kind of stuff, and then the overall level's turned up. So that gives you an overall effect of the average level, the RMS level of the music being much higher. So if we look at this piece of audio within the digital domain, we always have a maximum sound level that we can go to. So what we do is we add a limiting threshold in there and we chop off all the peaks above that level of the sound. And then we turn up the overall volume of the track, and then that has the effect of turning up all the quiet bits of the sound, so there's less of a range between the quieter sounds and the louder sounds. That gives an increase in the average level, making the track a lot louder. So while the process for mastering is different for every track, the most important thing is still that fresh perspective on the tune, and having it someone that's never heard it before look at what you've done, the finished article, and just kind of tweak little bits here and there just to enhance it. It really does make a big difference having that objectivity injected into the process at that point. The finished master will be the song that gets released. So really this is the last chance to just finesse anything that's in there that can be finessed and just get that little 5-10% extra out of the mix. You're not going to completely change your tune or work miracles with mastering. It is a small finishing touch process, but it can make the difference between a good sounding recording and a great sounding recording. So to sum up a few terms there, I've explained what tracks are. Tracks are essentially the products of your different microphones that you've used for recording. We've said what a mix is. Mix is the combination of these tracks, blend them all together into a finished single piece of audio. And then mastering is what we do to that finished piece of audio. So there's one more term that's worth explaining. Stem mastering. It's kind of like the evil twin of mastering, really. And it's probably responsible for quite a bit of confusion between different terms. I hear people calling tracks, what we described earlier as tracks, as stems. But really that's not what a stem is. A stem is a small group of tracks. So maybe you take all your drum tracks and mix them together as one finished track. That would be a stem. So stem mastering, as I say, is halfway between mixing and mastering really. So you'll bounce down stems of your instruments. So maybe you'll split your project into 3 or 4 or 5 stems, like say the drums, the bass, the guitars and the vocals. That would be 4 stems. Then you send that off to be mastered. So obviously with that, the mastering engineer's got loads more room for manoeuvre because they can actually, turn the vocals up, turn the drums down, or, they can make quite big changes. And there is a lot more mixing involved with that than with normal mastering. So if we have a look at stem mastering, you have all of your tracks that you've recorded from your different microphones and sources, and then you mix those together into separate stems. So group all the drums together, the bass, the vocals, and then what I've called the music in between. And then those get sent off to mastering for a mastering engineer to make a final master, which we call a stem master. So if we compare that to standard mastering, we still have all the tracks lined up in the same way, but they get combined straight away into one mix or 2 track, and then that's sent off for mastering. There's no intervening segment where we put things into stems first. So we have tracks, we have stems, we have mixes, and we have masters. So hopefully you understand a bit more what mastering is. If you'd like me to listen to your tracks, give you some feedback on your mixing, or if you'd like me to master your tracks, head over to my website, mymixmaster.co.uk, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.